I remember when many years ago when I was meditating on this matter of dying with Christ, I think when the Lord first began to manifest this truth to me more than 40 years ago. I didn't understand it all fully, but I was looking at different passages in Scripture which spoke about death, what happens when a person dies, and applying it to this inward death that Jesus brings us to when we are crucified with Christ. And one of the passages I saw those days was Psalm 146. In Psalm 146 it speaks about death. It speaks about mortal man in verse 3. Mortal man, Psalm 146:3, in whom there is no salvation. And here's a description of death. His spirit departs, he returns to the earth, and in that very day his thoughts perish. Then you know you have died. When your thoughts have perished. That means you acknowledge that your thoughts could be completely wrong. You put it to death. I could be wrong. My opinions could all be wrong. This is what Paul means when he says in 2 Corinthians 10 to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. In 2 Corinthians 10 verse 4, what are the lofty things within us, say 10 verse 5, sorry. What are the lofty things within us which rise up against the knowledge of God? That's our own thoughts. My strong opinions about various things. The demands that I make on other people. Not verbally. It's all sort of silent inward demands that we can make on one another. You know, I could be expecting respect from others. My thoughts haven't perished then. I expect someone to treat me in a certain way, to be respectful, maybe because I'm older and he's younger, and I'm a bit offended that he treats me like a peer. I haven't died. I'll never be one with that brother. This is what happens very often among Christians within the older generation and younger generation, the big gap that comes because the older person thinks, hey, how dare he treat me like himself? I'm not like himself. You know, like the laborers who came in the first hour, when the folks who came at the 11th hour got their wages, their complaint was, how can you make them equal to us? It's a characteristic of the race of Adam. How can you make that person equal to me? He was converted yesterday. I was converted 50 years ago. How in the world can you make him equal to me? And if we have any thought like that, our thoughts haven't perished. We haven't brought every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And however much you may think there's a fault with the other person, then probably the fault is with you. You're not willing to die. I believe this is the secret. This is the reason. If you really want to be one as husband and wife, if you really want to be one in a church, this is the price. And I might as well tell you that most Christians are not willing to pay it. And so they'll never be one. They'll never be one in their home. There may be a superficial unity just to, you know, like window dressing to show other people in the church that we're one. Or in the church to show other churches we're not like other churches, we don't have conflict. I mean, the absence of conflict, the fact that we don't fight with each other, that doesn't mean we're one. I mean, Jesus and the Father, he didn't say, I don't fight with the Father, that proves I'm one. No. There are a lot of people we don't fight with. That doesn't mean we're one. And maybe you never fought with your neighbors. It doesn't mean you're one with your neighbor. So the absence of conflict in a church doesn't prove that we're one. I mean, we can be thankful for that because that's 1,000 times better than other churches. But that's not our standard. He didn't pray that we shouldn't have conflict with each other. He said that we must be one. All men will know you're my disciples when you don't fight with each other? No. All men will know you're my disciples when you love one another. And that means we're one, and it means I don't seek my own. My thoughts have perished. My opinion of myself is gone. In other words, you cannot offend me by what you do or don't do, by what you say or don't say. You cannot offend me. I believe that is where we must begin. I always say that's the kindergarten lesson. There are a lot of sins in our life which take a long time to get rid of. With men, sexual temptation is an area where it's a battle for many decades before a person can come to rest in that area. It's a constant battle. Even after we are born again and filled with the Spirit, if you are not watchful, you can fall. Anger is another area where we may have to fight and struggle. It takes time. Love of money is another huge area that can take many years to really overcome. Totally. I mean, there are layers of the love of money like an onion, and to get right down to the center of the onion can take many years. Some people just take off one layer and say, I'm free from the love of money because in some area they were a bit generous. That doesn't prove anything. Very deep-rooted. Selfishness, pride, these are all very deep-rooted. But one thing we can get rid of easily if we want to is getting offended. I say that's the kindergarten lesson. We really got to finish with it. And if you don't make progress here, you're really not going to go to the next class, to the next grade. And why is it I get offended? My thoughts haven't perished. I talk about dying with Christ, but I've not really died. I don't want to die. I don't want to take, and it's not something I can do once for all. I wish I could do it once for all, like on Calvary, finish and gone. But it isn't. The old man is finished and gone in a moment. Romans 6 says the old man is crucified with Christ and buried. That's over. That's what God did. But the flesh is something we have to crucify all the time. Galatians 5:24, they that are Christ have this attitude of they have crucified the flesh. It's God killed the old man, but we have to kill the flesh. It's so clear. Romans 6 is the old man, and Galatians 5:24 is what we have to do, or Romans 8:13 is what we have to do. If you through the Spirit put to death the deeds of the body. So you need to understand the difference between Romans 6, Romans 6:6, the old man God put to death, and Romans 8:13, the deeds of the body we have to put to death. These are two different things. Or the Old Testament example of that is very beautiful. The armies of Egypt, God killed them. But the armies in Canaan, the Israelites had to kill. See the difference? The Israelites didn't have to lift a finger to kill the armies of Egypt. That's the old man. One moment. In the river, gone. And that's why the Israelites going through the Red Sea is a picture of our baptism. It says they were baptized in the Red Sea, 1 Corinthians 10. And our baptism is a picture of our old man buried. That is the Egyptian army buried. And God did it all. He crucified our old man with Christ. But when it comes to the armies of Canaan, the giants in Canaan, the lusts in our flesh, God doesn't kill them. He doesn't kill one of them. We got to kill them. But in God's power. If we don't depend on God's power, then the giants rule the land. And that's exactly what we read in the book of Judges. How they allowed the giants to rule in pockets here and there. There are a few little bits of area where they conquered. Repeatedly it says in the book of Judges, but the Israelites allowed these people to live here, and the Israelites allowed some other folks to live there. Exactly. The book of Judges is a perfect picture of believers. They've conquered certain areas in their life, and they're quite content. There's a whole huge land of Canaan to be conquered, but they seem to be content that they have occupied 2 or 3 areas, or a few areas, and it could be written about their life, but they allowed the flesh to rule here, and but they allowed the flesh to rule there. And they seem to be content with it. I mean, it amazes me. Don't you feel surprised that God told them very clearly that the Canaanites were all to be killed, but Israelites just allowed them to live? and we're supposed to finish with all the flesh, with its affections and lusts. But so many believers just don't seem to take it seriously, that so many of those lusts are still living. So that's the reason why this unity is not there, and we can talk about it and sing about it, but we'll never come to that unity unless each is willing to say, Lord, I want to go down to the death of the cross. It's on the cross, what did we read in Ephesians 2? That on the cross, He made them one body. So, it's anybody, two brothers, if they're to be one, they must both be crucified. If husband and wife want to be one, both must be crucified. Their thoughts must perish. And when we do that, Satan can't rule over us anymore, like he did. That's the secret of freedom from Satan too. That also I saw in an Old Testament picture, in another place where death is described in the book of Job. Here's another place in Job where death is described. That when a person dies, he says in Job chapter 3, verse 11, why didn't I die at birth? Or come forth from the womb and expire? Because if I had died, then verse 13, I would have been lying down quietly and I would have been at rest. You know why there's so much unrest among Christians and in their heart and with one another? They haven't died. That's all. And in death, the weary, verse 17, are at rest. And they don't hear the voice of the taskmaster, verse 18, and the slave is free from his master. Our master was the devil. And in death, I'm free from my master. It's the only way the slave can be free from his master. A servant can leave his master by resigning his job. But a slave, there's no resignation. He's bound to his master for life. And the only way a slave in those days could escape from his master was by death. And the slavery the human beings are slaves to the devil, to be really free from the devil is by death. And that's what God accomplished for all His children on the cross. And that's why people in the Old Testament continue to be slaves of Satan. Even men after God's own heart like David was a slave of Satan at different times. But in the New Testament, in death, when we are crucified with Christ, the slave is free from his master. And you can come to the place where you hardly even hear the voice of the taskmaster. That we who frequently heard the voice of the devil, now we hear the voice of God. So it's a wonderful thing if we choose it. And it's amazing that most Christians don't even know about it because their leaders never teach about the cross. And even those who talk about it, they don't live it. And it's not once for all. Like I said, the old man being buried is once for all. But the battling the flesh, which is the giants in Canaan, is a daily affair. I mean, at the end of Joshua's life, God says to him, there's still a lot of land to be possessed. He tells Joshua, a whole lot of land to be possessed. Now, you've got to encourage the others to possess the rest of the land. So that's a daily affair. That's why Jesus said, you've got to take up the cross daily. Every single day, I have to choose to die.